a battlefield bathed in blood and fire, a hero's party clashed with the Demon King. In the end, it was not the shining hero who made the greatest sacrifice, but the rogue, a thief who stood against death itself and survived, cursed with immortality. 150 years passed. The world changed, kingdoms rose and fell, yet he remained. Not a man, but a skeleton, wandering in solitude, burdened with a gift that was really a curse. Then, fate placed a child in his path, an orphan who looked past his monstrous face and begged to become his disciple. For 11 years they trained together. For 11 years, she became his reason to live again. And when she finally became a heroine, the Empire struck her down. Grief turned to rage. The rogue who once fought beside heroes now marched as a necromancer, commanding an army of the dead. To the people, he was vengeance itself. But vengeance alone cannot fill an endless life. Haunted by his disciples' final wish for adventure, not hatred, the immortal skeleton must choose, remain a curse upon the world, or honor her dream and walk a new path. This is not the tale of the hero or the king. This is the story of the forgotten rogue, the skeletal messenger who carries both vengeance and hope. Beneath a sky tinted crimson, dark crows circled above, their harsh cries echoing over the silent remains of a battlefield. Scattered among shattered blades and debris, a solitary warrior rested on his back, surrounded by the ruins of conflict. The warrior's eyes fluttered open, his face marked by bruises and streaks of blood from the fierce battle. Disoriented, he tried to recall if he had blacked out during the fight. Summoning all his remaining strength, he pushed himself upright, his eyes scanning the ruined landscape and spotting his enormous sword resting close by. Uncertainty clouded his thoughts as he wondered about the length of time he had been out and tried to piece together the events that had unfolded in the battle. Without warning, as he drifted deep in contemplation, an intense, stabbing pain pierced his chest. The force made him double over, his hands pressing tightly against the aching spot as he realized that several of his ribs must have been fractured. In spite of his serious wound, he summoned the last of his determination as he noticed his body was still capable of movement. He scanned his surroundings in search of his friends, but his heart grew heavy with grief when he discovered the lifeless forms of his teammates scattered all around him. The mage dressed in an orange robe fought courageously beside him, skillfully wielding radiant talismans to keep two shadowy foes at bay. A sudden, fierce burst of light erupted. The focus moved to the Demon King, the story's formidable villain, who stood tall in heavy armor with a menacing purple sword resting on his shoulder, all beneath the dark cover of a never-ending eclipse. Opposite him, the hero with golden hair confronted the threat, displaying unwavering bravery. The Demon King unleashed his full strength, demonstrating the immense authority that came with his title. A thick fog started to form, swirling at the ground and slowly curling around the hero's feet. A vast horde of undead soldiers began to pour out from that place. The sudden arrival of countless undead caught the warrior off guard. They realized that the Demon King had kept this ability secret until now. He raised his voice, urgently summoning his teammates and desperately seeking the priest's assistance. The priest shifted his attention in the direction of the noise, where the warrior Rogue stood. Rogue requested the priest's help to receive the authority spell, then sprinted at top speed straight toward the Demon King. The priest began to chant, invoking the authority spell upon Rogue and calling for the one who possessed the authority to grant them strength. He answered the summons by unleashing his power, authority of light, painful oblivion, directing it toward Rogue. The darkness was suddenly overpowered by a blinding burst of white light, creating a massive explosion. With unstoppable determination, Rogue rushed forward, breaking through every undead creature that tried to block his path. The horde of undead surged forward without end, giving him no opportunity to pause or regain his balance as they pressed in on all sides. Rogue unleashed a furious assault with his sword, each strike crashing down with relentless force and shredding the advancing undead into fragments. He announced his intention to handle every enemy himself, determined to ensure his comrade had a safe passage forward. Rogue let out a powerful scream that echoed across the chaotic field, his voice inspiring the hero to push forward bravely and confront the Demon King without fear. With unwavering resolve reflected in his eyes, the hero moved forward step by step, gripping his shining sword tightly, prepared to face the Demon King with every ounce of bravery he possessed. His energy collided with the king's swirling purple aura, as they faced off in a final, decisive duel. Clashes rang out as the hero's blade met the force of the Demon King's magic, each strike rumbling through the earth. Although the fight raged on with unrelenting intensity, neither side seemed to gain the upper hand. Both opponents remained unyielding, locked in a stalemate. The intense battle between the two resulted in everything around them being utterly ruined. The struggle between the hero and the Demon King grew even fiercer. At a crucial point, the hero swung his sword with tremendous force, striking a powerful and decisive blow. The hero drove his sword into the Demon King's torso, slicing through flesh and cutting off the creature's arm. The hero stood tall before the Demon King and announced that their battle had come to an end. The hero fixed the Demon King with an intense look, leveling his sword in the king's direction and making it clear through his actions that defeat was unavoidable for his enemy. The Demon King's injury mended with astonishing speed. During a brief lapse in attention, he swiftly reached out and seized the hero with incredible force. The Demon King's voice carried a chilling serenity as he declared that nothing truly ends. Everything simply moves forward without conclusion. Unstable energy radiated from his body, making it clear to the hero that his enemy intended to destroy himself in a final, desperate act. Just as the blast threatened to consume all in its path, Rogue made a sudden entrance. Gazing at the hero, who stood motionless as if rooted to the spot, the onlooker puzzled over what had caused him to halt. Rogue swung his blade with tremendous force, slicing through the Demon King's hand and freeing the hero from its powerful grip. He chose to stay behind and confront death, insisting that if their fate was to perish, then they would meet it side by side. The hero cried out the thief's name in anguish, watching helplessly as a powerful blast engulfed both the thief and the Demon King. After the explosion faded, a heavy silence settled over the area. Suddenly, a colossal and enigmatic black pillar, later called the Abyss Transition, burst upward from the earth. The priest gazed at the pillar, his expression puzzled as he tried to figure out its purpose. At the same time, the hero managed to stay alive, because a companion had given up their life for him. He glimpsed Rogue's ghostly figure, and believed he had managed to avoid the blast unharmed. The hero stood motionless, stunned by the sight of Rogue, who had been gravely wounded by the explosion and now bore a gaping wound in his body. Just then, a new creature emerged onto its gaze fixed on the disappearing traces of the Demon King. It conveyed a sense of letdown, having anticipated its master's rise to ultimate authority, yet the outcome appeared to be nothing more than a meaningless demise. Without warning, Rogue pushed past his pain and stood up, launching himself forward to deliver a powerful kick straight to the monster's face. The monster realized that Rogue was still alive despite the blast. A wave of surprise washed over it when the truth became clear. Rogue's continued existence revealed that he also held the necessary qualification. In his quest for dominance, he hurled Rogue down to the floor, asserting his claim to power. Rogue called out to the hero, signaling that now was the perfect time to strike. Both the hero and the priest sprang into action without hesitation. He called upon the power of light, shaping it into a sacred blade. With a single, powerful strike, swung his sword downward, delivering a fatal blow to the creature. The object broke apart into countless pieces. When the air cleared and calm returned, the mage stepped forward, worry etched on their face, seeking reassurance that both the hero and the rogue had made it through unharmed. The hero beckoned the priest to approach him. The priest feels a wave of relief upon seeing that everyone is unharmed. As he approaches, his eyes fall on Rogue's lifeless form lying beside the hero. His wounds started to close and mend by themselves, leaving him astonished. From afar, the Demon King's loyal servant observed the unfolding events, reassured despite his earlier uncertainty that everything was going according to plan. Turning to the priest, he inquired whether the hero had successfully received the blessing. The hero faced the Demon King, surprised to see that he had survived against all odds. The Demon King calmly eased the hero's concerns, clarifying that his body had fulfilled its role and was now starting to fall apart. In the end, the triumph belonged to them. In his last communication, he informs him that this is where his journey comes to a close. Now the hero prepared to start sharing his own tale. The Demon King foresees that the hero will face an endless series of decisions, each one pulling them further into hopelessness than they have ever known. He understood that, despite the risk of collapsing under the weight of his duties, he must continue forward. He needed to keep praying without pause and continue pushing ahead. The final thing he hoped for was that the hero's path would reach a conclusion unlike the one he experienced. He characterized it as lacking substance and senseless. His final presence faded away completely. The sky remained cloudless. The clash that would decide the destiny of the entire world finally came to a close. In the days that followed, time seemed to slip by in a blur. The headmaster of the magic school apprehended the mage and brought them back to the institution. The fairy set out on her own adventure, returning to the place where she was born. The priest offered his last goodbyes before departing from the world of the living once more. The hero received the crown and became the new king. Surrounded by his fellow citizens as they rejoiced, he stood in the heart of their celebration. Rogue made his way back to where he had first been standing. As the deceptive glow vanished, sunlight awakened the world once more, bringing life back to the land and driving away the fear that had haunted everyone's days. A long period of tranquility started, marking the dawn of a new age filled with peace. About a century and a half passed. A figure with a skull-shaped head rested against the trunk of a tree, quietly affirming his determination to persist on his journey. Rogue, once part of the hero's party and now more than 150 years old, begins to suspect that he might be coming down with a cold. Rogue reflected on the dramatic transformations that had swept across the land. Once solid mountains had collapsed, and fertile plains had withered into lifeless deserts. Sitting beneath the night sky, he mused that only the stars and he himself had remained constant through the ages. Yet as the thought lingered, he admitted to himself that even he was not untouched by change. Examining the lines etched into his aging hand, Rogue was reminded of the unending life he bore, a burden he could never escape. The gift the Demon King bestowed upon him before dying was meant to be a blessing, but instead, it turned out to be an everlasting curse that could never be lifted. He wondered why immortality existed and what it truly meant for him. He wondered what purpose his life held if he wasn't even able to vanish from the world. His destiny seemed to be eternal solitude. As he drifted deeper into his thoughts about existence, a shooting star streaked across the sky, drawing his gaze. A young child walked across his path. When she caught sight of him, shock overwhelmed her, and she let out a startled scream as she pointed at his skeletal appearance. A century and a half had passed since the fierce clash against the Demon King. Time, which had once stood still for Rogue, now started to move forward once more. High above the village of Tap, nestled on a mountain at the edge of the empire, the scene unfolds. The young girl gazed at Rogue, her eyes filled with inquisitiveness. Rogue found herself questioning the reason for her presence in this place at such a late hour. Without warning, the girl reached out and seized Rogue's face, leaving him stunned. She expressed astonishment upon discovering that he was a skeleton who could speak. Rogue requested that she cease what she was doing. He explained to her that, although he had witnessed countless children lose their way in the mountains, none had ever responded by patting him as she did. He looked at her with evident disapproval, questioning whether she had yet to realize that fleeing was the proper response when faced with something unnatural. The girl responded with a gentle sincerity, explaining that she had learned never to form opinions about people based on how they looked. Rogue silently admitted that a wave of nostalgia and emotion was washing over him for the first time in ages, but his thoughts were abruptly disrupted when an unfamiliar girl suddenly appeared before him. The girl's curiosity grew as she inquired about Rogue's name. Her eyes lingered on his unusual sword, and she wondered aloud if he might be a knight. Rogue refused to admit he was a master, instead proudly claiming to be an imperial messenger who journeyed throughout the land with important messages from the emperor. He went on to explain that he was now guarding this mountain, armed with a sword that was said to be cursed. The girl found herself amazed, deciding that anyone serving as an imperial messenger had to possess great strength, a statement Rogue acknowledged with evident pride. Rogue kept bragging, making it clear that this task wasn't something just anyone could handle. However, such feats demanded an advanced understanding of magic, particularly skills like spirit summoning. To demonstrate, he drew forth a tiny, purple, ghost-like being from within his sword. The girl's curiosity intensified, and she expressed her excitement by remarking that Rogue must possess great strength. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she expressed her desire to become Rogue's disciple, hoping that under his guidance she could gain strength. Rogue let out a laugh, his thoughts drifting to how monotonous his days had become and how he was growing restless from the sameness of his routine. He turned down the girl's plea, claiming it was too much trouble for him. The girl, taken aback by his rejection, questioned whether the story was meant to continue with him agreeing to make her his apprentice. The young girl refused to take Rogue's rejection and started begging him persistently, accusing him of being miserly and lacking compassion. Rogue paid no attention to her continued protests. He responded curtly, making it clear once more that he did not possess the skills of a master. The following morning, Rogue lounged beneath the shade of the tree, only to be caught off guard when he noticed the girl nearby. She remained full of energy, loudly calling out and swinging a stick as though it were a sword, clearly engrossed in her practice. He wondered aloud whether she planned to head home, but she firmly insisted that she would remain until he agreed to teach her how to use a sword. Rogue encouraged her to return home, mentioning that her parents might become anxious if she stayed out too late. He also grumbled about how his bony looks often led people to believe he was some kind of creature who abducted kids. The girl reassured him, insisting that he had nothing to be concerned about. She then explained with sadness that her family home had been destroyed by a fire, and that the tragedy had claimed the lives of her parents. Before her mother passed away, she had been told that finding strength was essential if she wanted to make it on her own, a lesson she now carried with her. This strong desire to protect herself led her to persistently pursue combat training. She fixed him with a serious gaze, wanting to know if he finally grasped what she was going through. Rogue let out a long, drawn-out sigh, and after a brief pause filled with quiet, at last he consented to instruct her in the art of sword fighting. The girl's face lit up with happiness, and she eagerly sought reassurance that his words were sincere. Rogue calmly assured her that he was, in fact, telling the truth, mentioning that it was impossible for him to keep denying a child's wish. This statement left the girl momentarily puzzled. The girl brushed off the matter without hesitation and expressed her gratitude to him with lively enthusiasm. Afterward, Rogue lifted his gaze toward the heavens, as though speaking to the memory of the late emperor, and reflected on the immense hardships his people had faced. For this reason, he resolved to guide the child in learning how to depend on themselves. He saw this as a way to make up for not delivering the emperor's message. From that moment, she set out on a long path of training. Over time, they continued their training side by side, often finding brief periods of respite beneath the shade of the tree. Rogue had the ability to call forth monsters from his sword. The girl would soon start her training, preparing herself to confront them in battle. At times, they went so far as to frighten those passing through. As a way to have fun, as time passed, the two developed a powerful and distinctive connection with one another. Over time, each of them grew to rely on the comfort of having the other nearby. Over time, the girl's skill with the sword steadily advanced. Throughout her training sessions with Rogue, the girl engaged him in intense sparring, matching his attacks with equal vigor. Even so, both of them felt content with the moments they shared. 11 years slipped by. Rogue, after snaring a rabbit, invited the girl to join him for a meal. The young woman with flowing hair respectfully acknowledged him, addressing him as her master. After more than a decade, the once small child had blossomed into a beautiful and graceful young woman. She took a seat next to Rogue, her expression grave as she prepared to share something important with him. Rogue wondered aloud about the significance of the news that had shifted the atmosphere so abruptly. She explained with sorrow that her former village had been deserted because a sudden surge of monsters had driven everyone away. It seemed as though the Empire had abandoned the place, leaving the people feeling utterly hopeless. She announced with confidence that she had gained enough strength. Rogue quickly understood that she intended to pursue the path of a hero. He explained to her that, after spending 11 years guiding her, he had learned to understand what she was thinking. He thought back to his childhood companion, a brave soul who shared his desire to make a difference in the world. Memories of the harsh words from others, who insisted he was unfit or that his goals could never be achieved, flooded his mind. He always insisted that saving others required no special credentials. At that instant, Rogue resolved to back her pursuit. As the only inheritor and expert of the northern hunting skills, he presented her with a dagger, upholding their customs. He hoped she would forever wield the sword guided by noble purposes. He encouraged her to embark on a mission to save the world, with the hope that she would come back to him afterward. He promised her that he would remain in that spot, waiting for her no matter what. Once she departed, Rogue found herself alone once more, pondering the length of the journey that still lay ahead. No one thought it would continue beyond 5 or 10 years. He only needed to defend this area until that time arrived. She felt confident that completing her mission would bring her the success she hoped for. Rogue realized that his only option was to remain calm and wait for her to come back. During his lengthy existence, this fleeting encounter had transformed him in a way nothing else ever had before. He no longer found waiting to be something that scared him. After spending a considerable amount of time by himself, he was caught off guard when she unexpectedly came back. The marks of a harsh conflict remained visible on them. She offered him a warm greeting, but so many years had passed that he struggled to recall who she was. The young woman launched into an animated description of the remarkable journeys she had experienced. She realized the empire was far bigger than she had ever pictured, overflowing with unfamiliar sights and destinations. She encountered numerous monsters along her journey and applied the lessons he had taught her to assist those in need. Because of what she had done, the public began to refer to her as the heroine. However, this newfound admiration infuriated the emperor, who viewed her as a hindrance to his power and a challenge to his rule. Unable to tolerate her presence, he commanded that she be killed. While she continued talking, a wave of dizziness washed over her, causing her to lose her balance and collapse into his waiting arms. In her last moments, she embraced him closely, searching his face for reassurance that he was all right and wondering if tears had fallen while she was gone. Cradled gently in Rogue's embrace, the heroine used her remaining strength to ask if he would share his story with her before she slipped away forever. Rogue's gaze burned with fury and resentment, directed at everyone who had ever caused her pain. At the same time, a group of imperial knights reached the mountain. Among them, a soldier complained, expressing his frustration that the infamous heroine had not met a quiet end, but had instead chosen this mountain as the place to face her fate. The commander instructed the soldier to remain quiet and keep searching. The knight commander spotted an individual in the woods and instructed him to come down from the mountain at once and gather his belongings. It was revealed that the individual was Rogue, who reacted with astonishment at the suggestion to leave the mountain. Rogue questioned the reason for departing, pointing out that this place could no longer be considered a mountain. Rogue unveiled the full extent of his abilities, calling forth a horde of terrifying monsters. The area was changed into a gruesome sight, littered with the bodies of monsters that had assaulted the knights. Rogue explained that, over a century ago, during his travels as a messenger across the land, he had discovered traces of the Demon King's army lingering at this very spot. He smashed their skulls and tore their bodies apart. Over time, layers built up and became the earth that now covers this place, providing a foundation where the forest eventually took root and flourished. Ever since that time, he had watched over the area, worried that necromancers could exploit it, yet now it appeared that his vigilance was no longer necessary. Caught off guard by the unexpected events, the knight could only stare in surprise while the commander swiftly directed everyone to remain composed and return to their stations. It was made clear that no matter how many corpses might be present, one necromancer could only command a certain number of undead at a time. He fell silent at once, his words cut short by the overwhelming sight of the massive army that Rogue had called forth. The commander understood that confronting such an overwhelming horde of monsters was utterly impossible. A massive horde of undead creatures moved steadily in their direction. The commander, his voice trembling with fear, demanded to know the identity of Rogue. Rogue acted swiftly, eliminating the commander by severing his head before the man had any opportunity to defend himself. Rogue, his voice filled with both pride and anger, revealed who he truly was. He served as more than a mere skeleton. He embodied the Emperor's will and spoke on behalf of the entire empire. His words resonated across the entire empire, carrying a message meant for all its citizens. Across every corner, curiosity swept through the crowds as everyone tried to make sense of the unfolding events. Rogue went on to recite the founding emperor's will, stating what should happen if the empire ever strayed from its original purpose. The ruler bestowed upon the nobles and faithful followers the authority to guide it back to its rightful course. He turned his attention toward the land where he had grown up. The figure announced that the moment had come for justice to be served for their wrongdoings. In a neighboring village, those who had escaped the monster's wrath caught sight of the advancing undead army. Alarmed shouts echoed through the air as the surviving soldiers charged forward, determined to battle the monsters with every ounce of strength they had left. The commander instructed the surviving troops to gather together in preparation to defend against the approaching assault. Surrounded by the fiery chaos of the war-torn field, the knights came to understand that the force before them could not have been summoned by a typical necromancer. Instead, an entire legion of reanimated warriors had assembled. Confronted by the urgent threat, instructed the others to move aside so he could advance. He himself to release his initial fighting move, a skill called Wolf Hunt. Unleashed his strike, his mind racing with curiosity over who possessed the power to call forth such a vast legion. Belonged to the ranks of the Empire's esteemed knights. His gaze was drawn to an enormous creature, weaving its way through the village's buildings. As he examined the scene more carefully, he noticed the necromancer cradled within the enormous grasp of the monster's hand. Leading the charge at the head of the zombie horde, someone pressed forward. The situation caught him off guard, since mages of his kind usually stayed safely behind their undead soldiers rather than facing danger at the front. He himself to unleash his wolf hunt technique once more. He sliced through the giant monster's leg, causing it to drop Rogue. He launched a surprise attack on Rogue, driving his spear toward Rogue's leg from a direction no one could have predicted. Upon noticing the strike that injured his leg, he deduced that it was who had severed the girl's leg. He rushed toward with all his might, his mind focused solely on taking him down. Barely succeeded in deflecting Rogue's strike, struggling with the intense effort it required. Expertly blocked Rogue's blade with a swift motion, countering by bringing his own sword through the air in response. With a quick motion, revealed Rogue's form, leaving him open and defenseless against any immediate assault. Aimed a powerful swing of his sword at Rogue's head, yet Rogue moved swiftly, dodging the attack without difficulty. Rogue darted ahead and delivered a powerful kick to his leg, making him stumble and struggle to stay upright. He followed up by striking his opponent in the face with a forceful punch, sending him crashing to the floor. Once Rogue finished, he lunged at, pinning him beneath his weight, and unleashed a relentless stream of punches upon him. Fought to rise, his body straining as he battled to break free from the fierce hold Rogue had on him. Summoning the last of his energy, forcefully kicked Rogue back. He then sliced his sword through the air, driving his opponent even farther away. With this sudden burst, managed to create enough distance between them to pause and regain his breath. He referred to his adversary as a cursed beast, confessing that he had not been challenged to such an extent since facing the four knights, and then, with evident bewilderment, questioned who this person truly was. Rogue, a member of the Avengers, provided the response. Resolved internally that he had to stall for a bit longer and maybe irritate his adversary even more. He dismissed the notion of revenge with a mocking tone, questioning in a sarcastic manner whom he was supposed to be avenging. He proudly claimed that he had taken the lives of so many people that he couldn't possibly guess which one had drawn the Avengers' wrath. He had always understood that practicing necromancy demanded an enormous amount of energy. He chose to delay his actions, hoping his rival would tire out before making his next move. His intentions fell apart the moment the Avenger materialized at his side, reaching out to press a hand firmly against his face. struggled to fight back, but Rogue acted swiftly, driving his sword into his hand. The sudden attack left his hand numb and useless, forcing him to drop his weapon. Rogue disapproved of his prideful claims about having taken a life. He clarified that the citizens of the Empire, along with his own student, the heroine, had endured hardship as a result of this trivial quest for authority. Despite the throbbing ache in his hand, pushed through the pain, launching himself at Rogue with a fierce determination, intent on bringing him down. Rogue delivered a powerful kick that launched him through the air, tumbled helplessly into the debris scattered across the ground. Amidst the ruins, he convinced himself that his deeds served the Empire's greater good, and that the loss of those lives was an unavoidable sacrifice. Rogue responded by calling him a pitiful individual, insisting that if what he had done was truly required, then meeting his end at Rogue's hands that day was just as inevitable. Responded with unwavering confidence, assuring everyone that he would survive through the day. Without warning, the heavens tore apart while columns of shimmering blue light shot upward from the earth. Had anticipated this instant for a long time. The anti-undead barrier shield had already been set up. They relied on the energy produced by 155 people serving as living mana sources. He announced that he had finished his task and instructed for it to be set in motion. An enormous surge of sacred power swept outward. The army of the undead was utterly destroyed. The knights celebrated as the monsters vanished from their sight. Informed Rogue that although he had achieved victory, his army had been completely wiped out. The narrator revealed that a mage from the hero's party had constructed this barrier 120 years earlier, and it had since been regarded as the most powerful one ever made. Rogue remained composed, acknowledging his awareness and recalling how vividly Mage's unyielding dedication to his craft had stayed with him. His eyes widened in shock as he took in the unexpected scene before him. Rogue expressed indifference toward the army, confident that he had the power to summon a new force whenever he wished. He stated that, unlike before, his supporters now were the very people harmed by the Empire, the ordinary citizens who had been taken advantage of. He sought companions to aid him in his mission for vengeance, vowing to destroy the Empire once and for all. He found himself recalling earlier days, when he was still with his former companions. In this place, the people despised conflict, yet they found themselves forced to take up arms in order to defend what they cherished most. Back then, he believed there was no escape from death, and he was certain that time in his life had ended for good. Rogue immersed himself in the depths of his own recollections. He couldn't help but wonder with resentment whether all the suffering and loss had been for a future as bleak as this. He could not recall a clear reason for his actions. The only thing he remembered was that he had marched onto the battlefield in the past, yet the purpose behind his decision and the identity of those he fought for had faded from his memory. During their absence, he was overwhelmed by a profound emptiness, uncertain about his next steps and questioning which direction his life should take. 4 days had passed since the heroine's defeat, and Rogue arrived at the Northern Adventurers' Village located on the northern continent. He stepped into the Adventurers' Guild, the sole establishment with its doors still open at that late hour. Unfolding a worn map across the table, he sought guidance from those present, hoping someone could assist him in navigating his path. He told them he had gotten lost as he traveled north through the mountains. A person in the room responded curtly, making it clear that the place was meant for adventurers, not for answering questions like a town help desk. Rogue remained composed, making it clear through his demeanor that he intended to depart once his objective was achieved. The adventurer observed that Rogue, despite saying he was lost, the air carried a heavy scent of blood. He mentioned that a troubling rumor had recently been circulating in his memory. The story centered on a necromancer who had slain knights and laid waste to the village of hidden beyond the mountains. Without any sign, the adventurer launched a rapid assault, charging straight at Rogue with remarkable speed. He then turned to Rogue and inquired whether the rumor in question referred to him. He exposed his bony features and loudly declared himself to be one of the living dead. Rogue cautioned those confronting him, advising them to think carefully before picking a fight. He released a surge of energy in a fierce blast, slamming his fist to the earth and belittling them by referring to them as mere children. With a powerful strike, Rogue managed to take down the assassin concealed beneath the ground, who had been lying in wait for the perfect opportunity to attack him. The leader of the adventurers acknowledged that their attempt at an ambush had not succeeded. He gave instructions to his soldiers, commanding them to take the man's life. Rogue accepted the command with an icy demeanor, pointing out that all he had done was request assistance in navigating his surroundings. He tightened his fist, silently vowing that any events unfolding from this moment forward would rest solely on their shoulders. A towering figure rushed toward him, brandishing a sword overhead and yelling a threat on his life. Rogue reacted quickly, deflecting the attack without any trouble. He proceeded to strike him multiple times in rapid succession. With a powerful strike, he landed a decisive hit that sent his opponent crashing to the ground. A second attacker lunged toward Rogue, thrusting his spear in rapid succession, yet Rogue skillfully evaded every strike with ease. Rogue raised his hand and stopped the spear in its tracks, catching his opponent off guard. Rogue seized his adversary and slammed him down onto the ground with powerful strength. He glanced around and noticed that two other individuals were coming toward him. The assassins attempted to encircle Rogue from both the front and the rear, aiming to leave him unable to defend against attacks from either direction. Rogue deftly evaded the assault launched by both opponents at once. Both attackers were caught off guard when their attempted strike did not go as planned. They had been confident it would be an effortless victory. Rogue seized both of their heads and forcefully smashed them against the floor. In a split second, he vanished from their sight as if he had never been there at all. Without warning, he materialized behind the adventurer's leader, leaving the leader stunned and bewildered by his mysterious vanishing act. The leader put as much distance as possible between themselves and Rogue. At that moment, the two started trading blows with Rogue. Rogue quickly understood that his adversary's movement to the right was only meant to deceive him. Despite realizing that the true threat came from the double attack, he still succeeded in evading it. Afterward, Rogue delivered a powerful kick to the adventurer, launching him across the room and slamming him against the wall. The crowd watched in disbelief as the battle concluded in a matter of moments, leaving them astonished by its swift resolution. With a single, powerful strike, Rogue sent the leader crashing down to the floor. The surviving adventurers stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend how swiftly their leader had fallen, terror gripping each of them. Rogue prepared to defeat the remaining opponents. A man with hair emerged unexpectedly and brought the conflict to a halt. He stated his confidence in being able to provide Rogue with exactly what he desired. The group of adventurers immediately identified the man before them as the man stated his name was Thor Finland and revealed that he led the Northern Adventurers Guild, known as. They proposed relocating to a different spot so they could continue their conversation. Inside the office belonging to the Thor started by bringing up the tale about a skeleton that adventurers near the mountain behind village had been discussing. He went on to clarify that multiple scouting groups had been dispatched to look into it, but all of them came back without any findings. Because of this, they began to believe the story was nothing more than a rumor. He showed clear astonishment as he realized it was indeed the truth. Rogue abruptly cut him off, making it clear that he couldn't afford to spend any more time. He prompted the other person to clearly express what he wanted. Thor went on to clarify that what he was asking for was straightforward. He described how the guild, though it was part of the empire, had been ignored for many years. Most villagers had left their houses, hoping to find protection elsewhere. Those who stayed behind had lost their lives on dangerous quests to protect their community, and the few who survived continued to live in fear of monster invasions. He explained to Rogue that everyone in the group was merely biding their time, resigned to an inevitable end. Rogue criticized the questioning whether he intended to voice grievances about the hardships they faced. He explained to him that survival depended on resisting the empire, implying that those who chose not to fight had sealed their own fate. He went on to emphasize that inaction would only ensure that nothing ever improved. Thor explained that it wasn't a matter of inaction on their part, but rather that they were powerless to respond. He clarified that maintaining law and order in the territories deserted by the Empire now depended on those left behind. Adventurers with a common purpose came together to safeguard their communities, while the other guilds dedicated all their resources to defending their loved ones and homes, ultimately finding themselves in circumstances much like those they faced before. Rogue wondered aloud whether uniting the guilds might be the key to standing against the Empire. Thor acknowledged Rogue's straightforward explanation, but he pointed out that taking such action would be the same as starting a war, and there was much more involved than just having bravery. He went on to explain that a great many lives would be lost. Thor confessed that they had long awaited a rescuer. He went on to explain that throughout their ordeal, they had clung to the possibility of hope, desperate for salvation. Suddenly, the heroine made her entrance. Her comforting optimism pulled everyone from the depths of hopelessness, and a shared belief grew that she could be their savior. He expressed his sorrow, reflecting on how they had held on to an unrealistic hope. Doubts filled his mind as he questioned the choices they had made and wondered if everything they believed in was simply naive or a sign of their inability to let go. Thor fixed his gaze on Rogue, a look of resolve in his eyes. He expressed that their encounter today had opened his eyes to something they had been missing all along: hatred. His outlook shifted completely. He stopped worrying about whether there would be a tomorrow or if their villages might be lost. As long as they could defeat their foes, he believed that sacrificing their lives was justified, because that was the harsh truth of war. Thor then approached Rogue with a request. He promised that 2 adventurers would be sent with him right away. They promised that, in time, they would collect all their resources to stand behind him. He pleaded earnestly, urging him to look past whether he was an avenger or a demon, and to disregard his true identity. He intended to gather everyone together so they could become part of his conflict. Rogue expressed regret for the destruction of his guild, admitting that he shared responsibility for allowing the Empire to overlook these lands until the village fell into such dire straits. Rogue accepted the request, remarking that it had been a century and a half since he had last taken on such a task, and then set a Crimson Adventurer's card down on the table. Thor stood in shock, his mind racing with the possibility that the card before him might be a Ruby-class Adventurer's card from the time of the Great War, a legendary rank once considered the highest, though it had vanished from existence long ago. Thor wanted to discover who Rogue really was. Rogue reassured him, insisting there was nothing to be concerned about. He referred to himself as nothing more than a lingering spirit from a troubled history. He declared that he would take on the task, and clarified that his journey would begin at the mountain range to the north. The tallest and most perilous mountain range across the land stood where snow endlessly drifted from the sky. Rogue set out from village, traveling along the northern path that led to the adventurer's post. 5 days had passed since they departed from the village. Rogue advanced warily through the mountain range, flanked by his 2 fellow adventurers, all 3 moving with careful steps. Rogue observed that their group was advancing unusually quickly for a covert operation. Meanwhile, an adventurer scanning the distant landscape through his binoculars explained that they had to avoid any chance of encountering the Empire's forces. Rogue acknowledged the rapid pace at which they were advancing, and Sammy spotted a distant crowd appearing along the edge of the horizon. Rogue questioned in her mind the identity of the strangers, and puzzled over how they had managed to move past her group so quickly. One member of the group speculated that their pursuers were unlikely to be a search party. Upon closer observation, they recognized the newcomers as survivors hailing from the village of. It appeared that the group had teamed up with others to plunder villages as they traveled toward the capital. Sword, his companion, realized that their route through the mountains had been blocked, and this was evident from the fact that none of them wore clothing suitable for winter. Rogue glanced at his 2 companions before directing a question to the guide, seeking information about where they would end up if they chose the lower path. Sami interrupted, making sure Rogue knew both his name and the name of his companion, Sword, and requested that Rogue try to remember who they were. He responded to the inquiry by describing how the road was lined with a few isolated houses, spaced apart from one another. Sword anticipated that the group would attack, hoping to seize their provisions and resources. With a tone of resentment, Sword observed that the Empire's knights now frequently resorted to ransacking homes. Since the current emperor had taken the throne, the provinces had grown accustomed to the situation. After pausing to consider the situation, Rogue stated with composure that he had no choice but to remove them. Before his companions had a chance to grasp the meaning of his words, from the edge of the towering cliff, he sprang into the air. They were left stunned and unable to believe what had just happened. Below, a wave of panic swept through the ranks as soldiers raised their voices, alerting each other to the threat of an impending ambush. Rogue touched down among them, leaving no doubt that their suspicions had come true. Sword charged ahead with a loud cry, questioning internally whether his opponent truly wished for death. High above the chaos, Sammy observed the action and remarked to the companion beside him that the man below no longer had any hope of survival. The soldiers sprang to attention as the alarm blared, their faces paling in fear when they identified the assailant as the infamous necromancer from village. Rogue slipped through the crowd of knights, silently defeating each one as she passed. As desperate pleas for mercy echoed around them, the voices of others rose through the air. The commander instructed his soldiers to halt their withdrawal and move to encircle the assailant. He attempted to convince his allies to launch a joint attack, pointing out that their opponent was alone, but before he could finish, Rogue unleashed a surge of purple energy that struck him down instantly. Rogue sneered at the fallen commander, questioning whether the man had truly believed he was by himself, and if he had ever used his eyes for anything other than show. At that moment, Rogue revealed his full strength, calling forth a menacing horde of violet phantoms and ghostly figures. From afar, Sword observed the unfolding events, and came to understand that the abilities Rogue had displayed at the Adventurers Guild represented just a glimpse of his true power. The spectral army swept down on the soldiers, ripping apart their formations as they advanced. Both and Sami immediately realized who the spirits were, and fear swept over them. They were referred to as the spirits that haunted village. As the fight drew to a close, Sami proposed descending. Nodded in agreement, realizing that the outcome of the battle was already clear and the end was near. In the story's climax, a solitary knight launched a last, frantic assault against Rogue, his voice echoing in a final, anguished shout. Rogue skillfully blocked the last knight's strike and slipped past the thrust of his spear with ease. Before he could collapse, a powerful kick struck his head, sending him crashing to the ground. Rogue noticed a golden necklace hanging from the neck of the knight, whose helmet had cracked open after he collapsed lifelessly. The necklace transported Rogue to a different era. The memory drifted back to the moment when the adventurer had presented him with that necklace, offering it as a sign of regret. They confessed that his looks naturally made them wary. The man went on to clarify that the necklace was a lucky talisman for travelers, crafted by his own daughter. Rogue took the gift and requested that he express her gratitude to his daughter. The man, with a heavy heart, explained that the Imperial Army had taken her life 2 years earlier. Rogue quickly offered an apology without hesitation. The man, however, calmed his fears, pointing out that everyone in the village bore similar scars and held bitter hatred toward the Empire, describing themselves as mere humans sacrificing the remnants of their lives in pursuit of vengeance. He proceeded to give the young man some guidance, warning him against making the same mistakes they had by pursuing revenge and risking his future. He expressed his belief that each person in the world had someone out there waiting for them, and he felt confident that Rogue was no exception. She pleaded with him, desperately hoping he would not continue down that dangerous road. As the recollection slipped away, Rogue found himself facing the knight, who now lay wounded after being struck from behind with a spear by one of Rogue's own summoned creatures. His final moments were spent expressing regret to his daughter. Rogue's hand curled into a tight fist. With a powerful blow, the ghost vanished instantly, its form dissolving into nothing. His companions drew near, with Mir and Sammy offering words of praise, letting him know they thought he had performed admirably. He suggested that they handle tidying up the area and gathering the corpses required for raising additional undead, while he took some time to recover. Rogue caught everyone off guard when she insisted that every body be set on fire. His companions reacted with astonishment, noting how unusual he was for a necromancer. Sword observed that his face was marked by a profound sadness. Rogue gazed at the fire as it blazed intensely. The Demon King's voice resounded within his thoughts, taunting him with a cruel reminder that his own moment had finally arrived, just as the demon had predicted. The mysterious voice persisted in its warning, explaining that Rogue faced an endless series of difficult decisions, would experience a depth of hopelessness unfamiliar to him, and that the worst of his suffering was still to come. Rogue's fury erupted as he demanded that the voice cease speaking and remain in the underworld where it belonged, so long as it remained without life. The ghostly figure of the Demon King let out a booming laugh, mocking Rogue and questioning whether he could possibly endure given his weakened condition. The entity encouraged him to resist with all his might and attempt to challenge destiny itself. However, an unimaginable despair lay in wait for him at the journey's end, a darkness so profound that even the Demon King remained unaware of its existence. He was challenged to see if he could break free from the fate set before him. In another part of the land, Frey, a knight known for his role in the war, watched with satisfaction as flames engulfed the kingdom. She revealed her fascination with the way people's screams sounded. The scent of burning wood lingered in the air. A soldier approached her and relayed that the men were eager to use the princess's head as a football, but she firmly declined their request. She tried to excuse her actions, claiming that heartbreak was to blame. She had once believed this kingdom would be vast enough to provide her with a worthy challenge. The fight concluded without much excitement, leaving her feeling uninterested. She idly questioned whether anyone in the Empire was reckless enough to pick a real fight. Just then, an imperial courier appeared on the scene. News quickly spread about a massive horde of undead gathering at the northern wall, along with the Emperor's command to defeat the sinister necromancer who commanded them. Frey burst into joyful laughter, astonished by how swiftly such a wild character had shown up. She rose to her feet and instructed her soldiers to gather together. The announcement was made that the moment had come to begin the war. As they continued their march, Sword and Sami discussed the presence of the quiet rogue beside them. Sami observed that the rogue had been moving in silence for 2 weeks, appearing lifeless and unresponsive. He noted an odd quality about it, his mind puzzling over the impossibility of a head hovering in midair. Sword remembered how the guild leader had mentioned that the undead encountered in village might have some connection to the heroine who had passed away not long ago. He mentioned that village was the place where the heroine had grown up. At the same time she fled from the knights and reached the village, the undead army event began to unfold. The way rogues battled stood out as the most significant aspect. It was identical to the one the heroines possessed. The guild leader came to believe that Rogue wasn't truly a bad person, but rather someone who was desperate and facing hardships, much like the rest of them. He was uncertain about his reasons for traveling toward the northern mountains, but he felt confident that Rogue was not someone they needed to fear. Although there was no certainty that he supported their cause, he undeniably held the power necessary to bring down the Empire. Thor Finland, who served as informed the adventurers that he planned to assign them the responsibility of leading the rogues, citing their northern origins as the reason for his trust. Sword questioned in her mind whether someone as erratic as Rogue could truly be relied upon to follow their intentions. Thor offered words of comfort, putting the others at ease. He showed faith in his sharp instincts. As they traveled, Sword gestured toward the path leading to village. Rogue decided to halt at that spot. The scene stirred up recollections from earlier times, whenever his student covered his head with a paper bag. They cherished the joyful times they shared while living in the village. Rogue stepped into the tavern she knew well. The tavern's owner welcomed him, explaining that if he was hoping to relive the past, he had arrived too late. After all, the tavern had been shut down for quite some time. She inquired about whether he continued to use the bread bag, which made it clear that she recognized him. Rogue felt a jolt of astonishment as she realized she could identify him. The tavern owner revealed that she recognized him as the teacher of the girl who had once been in her employ. She admitted she had listened to numerous tales about him, yet she was unaware until now that he was an undead who could speak. Afterward, she filled his glass with an inexpensive wine labeled, mentioning that the name symbolized a fresh start. She explained that his disciple had given her this drink before departing, expressing a wish that they might one day share it together in honor of their travels. She explained that adventurers had made a tradition of exchanging this wine, believing it would bring them luck and protection on their travels. She explained with a hint of sadness that this wine had not found a buyer in quite some time. Since no adventurers remained in the village, the place had grown quiet and still. She approached Rogue and expressed that, while she recognized his reasons for resisting in a broken nation, she felt his pursuit of vengeance was misguided. She wondered if the person he appeared to be now would remain the same, even if he ultimately managed to rescue the citizens of the Empire. It was exactly the outcome his disciple would have wished for him. She responded by expressing her belief that was not the case. He believed the girl would have preferred a happier future for him. She went on to explain that his disciple had entrusted her with additional items meant for him. She revealed that the girl's greatest wish was to experience a life like those in fairy tales, finding friends along the way, helping those in need, and overcoming wickedness. She longed to set out on a journey filled with excitement, just like the stories told about the famous Ruby-class adventurers. She longed to share that experience by his side. The term adventure resonated in Rogue's thoughts, leading him to understand that hatred has the power to cloud judgment and cause even the most intelligent individuals to become lost. He questioned whether his frustration was leading him to make the same errors once more. Deep down, he acknowledged that despite being recognized by others as a teacher, it was truly his student who had taught him the most. Rogue, feeling a surge of determination, resolved to bear the hopes and aspirations of his companions. He expressed his gratitude to the tavern owner for the beverage before making his way toward the exit. As he walked away, it felt to him as though her presence lingered, silently questioning his next destination. Rogue recalled that the wine symbolized a fresh start. After finishing his drink, he announced that it was time for them to continue their journey. On this occasion, he set out not driven by vengeance, but inspired by his disciple's long-held dream, a true adventure. Thus, the story of the skeletal messenger commenced.